How you doing? Good. Love the energy. So welcome to today's career conversation. We're very, very excited that you're here to join us. This is going to be a very great conversation. I'm so excited that you're all here. My name is Buki, and I work at the Career Center. I'm a senior career coach. And I really help and support any student interested in going into communications, arts, design, entertainment, and all of this. It's one of the reasons why we're doing this. So you all get to learn from professionals that are in the field, right? So you get to hear from their experience and know how to get into the field. Now, I'm not going to be doing this. I don't know a lot about entertainment, so I have the people that know a lot, right? So we're going to be asking them questions, allowing them to introduce themselves. I have some questions I'm going to get started with, but this is for you. So meaning that if you have questions, I want you to ask them. I'm just going to get us started, maybe shy and all of those. Maybe you're not shy because you're going into this field. I really want to be shy. But I'm going to get started with some questions and then we'll move along. We're also expecting one more panelist that should be online, but we'll keep checking if...
Tell me if somebody shows up.
Yeah. Yeah, someone shows up there. And are we recording already?
We are recording.
Awesome. Perfect. And this will be made available on our YouTube channel, the Career Center's YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it. And especially, I want to thank the Department of Theater for making this possible. Really, I'm very grateful. So, having said all of that great introduction, let's get everyone to introduce themselves. So if you just want to say your name, what you do, and then we'll go to the next question.
Hi everybody, my name is Ethan Graham Rader, pronouns are he, him. I am an actor, director, and the founder of First Take Co. I graduated from the theater department in 2016.
Hi, I'm Jason Fogarty. I'm the technical director for the Clarence Brown Theater.
Hi, I'm Katie Cunningham. I'm an actor. I'm a professor here at UT, and I'm head of the acting area in the Department of Theater.
I'm Joe Payne, he, him, and I teach sound and projection design, and I am a composer and sound designer primarily for the Utah Shakespeare Festival, which is sort of my creative home, but I design around the country.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm going to start with Ethan, and then we'll go down the road. Can you share your career journey and how you started or got into this field that you are in?
Sure, yeah, so I think my early journey is similar to a lot of people in theater where I was doing it through school as I was growing up. And then I came to the University of Tennessee to be a theater major. I actually became a college scholar, so not the theater major track. I did the interdisciplinary program here on campus. And I was planning on being an actor, like a musical theater actor. And then I went and saw a lot of theater that wasn't musical theater, and I said, never mind, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be a straight play actor. And so I started training in Shakespeare. I went to the Great River Shakespeare Festival as an intern the year after I graduated. And then from that trajectory, I was sort of working in and out. So I worked at the Clarence Brown Theater after I graduated quite a bit, was trying to take gigs outside, eventually interned at the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park in their year-long apprenticeship, which I think has now been discontinued. And then the pandemic hit. And as that happened, I said, what's a great thing to do in the middle of a pandemic? Start a theater company. So I started a theater company. And since then, I've still continued to work in Knoxville, around the country, and produce a lot of my own work as well.
So I started out in graphic design. I went to school, private art college in Michigan, graphic design, and quickly realized that I wasn't going to make it riding a desk. I needed to do something with my hands. And I mostly blame that on my father for taking away the hammer and nails from me when I was a kid. Always wanting to build stuff, always want to tear stuff apart, see what's inside, how do things work. And my wife is in high school theater. Her whole time in high school she was in theater, and she went to college for set design. So she kind of pulled me into building props. Actually, it was a parking meter for a nonsense show, I can't remember exactly which one. But absolutely fell in love with the magic of theater and the behind the scenes stuff, and just jumped head first into theater, and have just been climbing the hill ever since. Started in a shop in Michigan as a carpenter, quickly became shop foreman, and just climbing and climbing. We moved to Knoxville 18, 19 years ago for her position as a prop shop supervisor at the Clarence Brown. At the time, there wasn't a position for me, so I was delivering pizzas and I was a security guard. I guarded some steps on the other side of the hill. So just doing what I could to make it. And then a position in Pigeon Forge opened up, building the props for the Miracle Theater, which became Smoky Mountain Opry. It was the Luis Mandrell. So I kind of got into the Pigeon Forge theater world, which is an interesting place. And then something more local came up. Bijou Theater needed a technical director. Now that's a roadhouse. If you guys are familiar, a roadhouse is just a theater that people come in, rock and roll shows, local community groups come in and rent it. Not a ton of creativity there, so I kind of got burned out after 5 or so years of that. And there wasn't anywhere for me to go, so I started my own business doing set and props and basically whatever I could to stay afloat. I've done stuff from Nickelodeon. I built a kitchen set for Paula Deen. If you guys have been to Pigeon Forge, the Hatfield McCoy is me. I did the set design and construction for the Hatfield McCoy as well. I could kind of go up and down the road and point stuff I've done. And then an ATD position opened up here at the shop, and it was kind of like the dream gig. Get to work with my wife during the day. I can go down and see her at lunchtime. We work really well together. But then took the ATD spot, and then our TD, Don Connor, retired. And so I decided to interview for that. So here I am, TD at Clarence Brown. So, yeah.
So I went to UNC Chapel Hill as an undergraduate, and they had on their campus a theater very similar in design and operation to the Clarence Brown Theater here at UT. And that theater is called Playmakers Repertory Company. And when I was an undergraduate, I worked backstage on the shows, I understudied the shows, and I got introduced to this idea of the repertory model where there's a company of actors who work together year after year, and that became what I was fixated on for what I wanted for my career. There are all types of different ways that you can pursue the craft of acting, and I was pursuing this very specific thing. That I picked a thing that is a dying thing, and there are very few of those companies left, and we are one of them here. So I consider myself very fortunate to have gotten into this position that I now have. But in the years between when I saw this model as an undergraduate student and when I came here to UT 10 years ago as a guest artist, as a guest actor in the company, I was living in New York City and building my network. And I was working at all different theaters, doing a lot of different things, doing a little bit of film and television, voiceover work, but primarily focusing on theater. And it's having that network that will probably be a recurring theme that we'll come back to again and again, because I was building a reach of people who knew me and who knew my work and could speak to what I do. So when the phone rang and someone said, "What do you think about her?" usually they had something good to say, and that helped me to put the next step in place. So yeah, I saw this model when I was an undergraduate, but it's not like you can just go straight from that to, there's a bunch of intermediary steps in between. And for me, living in New York City for 12 years and being a working actor there was laying the foundation for my current career.
Well, I grew up in a musical family, a kind of a large family from Utah, and all of my siblings and my parents are all gigging musicians. And I wanted a more stable job than they had. They were starving artists. And so I went to college. I wanted to be a graphic designer as well. I drew a lot in high school, and I wanted to do graphic design, and got sucked into the theater department doing set design. But because of my musical background, they quickly asked me to start doing sound for them. And so this is back in the days of splicing tape. And so I was splicing tape and recording cues and and making music and sound for shows. And I was lucky enough to get a summer job working at the Utah Shakespeare Festival as a technician. And after I graduated college and went out into the industry and started working, I decided that I wanted to be a sound designer. I enjoyed it very much and got to use my musical skills. And then after being out in the industry for a little bit, the Utah Shakespeare Festival remembered me as a technician and liked me, and I had sent them new resumes and stuff as a designer, and they brought me back as a designer, and that was 20 years ago, and I've been designing for them ever since. In the meantime, I worked for a resident theater on campus, just like here in Salt Lake City, Pioneer Theater Company, which is attached to the University of Utah. And they started doing productions with a little bit of video in it, a little bit of projection onto scenery. They'd have a live camera, or they'd have just some backdrops they want to do, and they didn't have anybody to do it. And with my sort of graphic design background, I was like, well, I'll give it a try. And loved it, and started doing more and more of that digital media design for live entertainment. And since then, I've just been doing about half and half, so sound and composition and projection design. And I've made a career out of it. As what's interesting is Katie and I, as faculty here, we still go out and work all the time, keeping connections with theater companies and keeping connections with the outside world.
Awesome, thank you. I hope you're already taking notes. Please mention. Because I think one thing I'm already seeing as a trend here is that network. That's a big piece of growing in this field, and also jumping on opportunities as they come, right? Even though Joe wasn't like really wanting to do graphic design, he was like, I can try it, and then he did it. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, this next question, you already alluded to some of it, but I wanted to ask it in a different way. So my question is, like, what are some of the positions you held before you got to this career? You already mentioned some of that, but like, can you talk about the ones that were very impactful? So, in your opinion, if you did not have that position or have that opportunity, it may not have prepared you for where you currently are. Does that make sense? So, if you want to just go around, we'll just keep going this way.
Sort of two strands of thought. The first non-theater strand of thought is I had a very strong sense of values and what I wanted my life to look like. And in knowing that, I knew that my job that prepared me for a career in theater needed to be something that was flexible, that paid me well enough, that I was still able to pursue opportunities. And so I spent a lot of time really digging into my non-theater career in order to prepare me to do the theater career. So I think that was really, really important, and I've worked a wide selection of jobs, often at libraries, because there's a library in every city, so you can get a job at a library. But those skills really prepared me to pursue theater more full-time. And I would say for myself, as my career is growing, I work 4-6 shows a year. It's still only like 20% of my income, right? Most of my income is coming from other jobs, even now, and I'm working quite frequently. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Now, for those theater career pieces, I would not be where I am now if I hadn't interned at the Great River Shakespeare Festival. I think that my year right after I graduated undergrad created bits of that network that I'm still calling on. I met a lot of people, not my year at the festival, but years later down the line when I would go back and visit, I would meet other folks. Some of them are in my company now, people that I worked with 3 years later, 5 years later. So I didn't do the grad school path yet, but I was making my own graduate school by going to these internships, by finding companies that I wanted to work with and just spending all of my time trying to work there. I think that was like my piece that's a little bit different.
So in a technical theater, I've pretty much worked every position except costume shop. Every time I try to cut fabric on the table saw, it gets stuck. So I just kind of shy away from that. I'm not good with fabric, but video, sound, I've run sound gigs, lights, I've done lighting design for concerts, for operas. I've done a whole wide range of stuff. As a technical director, I say that I'm a jack of all, master of none. So I know a little bit about everything. If I don't know it, every season I have a show that has something come to me. They want me to say yes to it, and I have no idea how I'm going to do it. So I have to take a little bit of a risk. But I've tried a little bit of everything to get to where I am now.
Picking up on some of the things Ethan Graham said, so for those of you who are interested in pursuing the career of acting, it's really important to think about what that survival job is going to be during the introductory and beginning intermediate phase of your career. It's very rare, it does happen, but it's very rare for someone to move to a new market, whether that's Atlanta or New York or Chicago or LA or Nashville, and immediately get signed by an agent and immediately start booking jobs and not need that survival job. So I think it's really wise to think about the things that you are good at that are not acting if you're going to pursue acting. And this is probably true for other fields too.
Absolutely.
But what are the things what skills do you have that are skills that you can apply in a survival job? But there's a specific caveat. A survival job that's not going to kill your soul and that's not going to drain you physically and emotionally and leave you unable to go out on auditions. So for me, my survival, I had many survival jobs over the years. One of them was waiting tables, and that is a brutal survival job. It's kind of a cliche that like everyone in New York is a starving actor and a server or a bartender. And there are some fun things about that culture, but it does not support the life of an actor because you're working late into the night and you got to be at those auditions at 8 a.m. and you need your sleep and you need to protect your voice. And it's also draining emotionally and spiritually. Working for tips is just, if you've done it, you know, there's a special kind of exchange that's happening that is tough. So I did that for a while and I was not doing well. I was not healthy mentally, I was not healthy physically, emotionally, and I also wasn't auditioning and I wasn't working and I wasn't booking anything. I was just sort of treading water in New York. I had like 2 years where I thought I was living this very glamorous life, but actually I was really unhappy and I was doing harm to my personal well-being. So I got out of that line of work and I leaned back on one of my strengths, which is writing and communication. So I started to do some for free, volunteering my services to write press releases and copy for websites and social media. And I got enough gigs that I could put together a portfolio. And then one of the people I worked for free for actually converted to paying me to do some social media work. And that expanded and expanded. And then I got a job working for a company that was essentially a ghostwriting company. I think this realm has changed in the advent of ChatGPT, which didn't exist at the time that I was doing this, but this was a company where anyone could hire them to create their content. So social media content, press releases. I was also writing in the voice of a doctor. Many of my patients ask about the latest treatments for these things, so it's that kind of work. But I was using a skill that I had. It didn't drain me physically, it didn't drain me emotionally. I could do it whenever the time was good for me to do it. It didn't prevent me from going to auditions. And it sustained me for about 5 or 6 years before I was making enough money in the profession of acting to not need that job anymore. So I would encourage everyone, but especially the actors, to think about what are those skills you have that could be that survival job that ideally isn't waiting tables or bartending?
My funnest and most exhausting job I ever had was as a sound engineer for a live reinforcement company. So in concerts, in rock and roll, the big tours, Taylor Swift, travels the world with a sound system and a bunch of trucks, and they all just load in and they load out, and they know what their gear is. But there's a lot of smaller concerts and a lot of one-off concerts. People are hired just to do a corporate show, like a famous artist will be in a ballroom with a corporation doing a private concert. And I worked for a sound rental company that would do those. So I would literally load in at 8 a.m. We'd do sound check by 4, do the show, load out, be out by 2 a.m., and then the next morning to get 8 a.m. And it was exhausting, but it was the coolest job in the whole world. I got to do sound and monitor mixing and set up for some of the coolest 90s grunge bands and 90s artists. This was in 94, 95, 96 that I was doing this. And so I got to meet all my favorite bands, which was really awesome. It's not the life that'll last forever, but because it's exhausting. It's really exhausting. But it honed my skills. Like, I became a really good sound engineer because I was just doing it every day. And because of that skill, I was asked to be the primary sound engineer for the Virginia Beach Arts Festival, which was kind of a festival with lots of bands in a given day. I was also one of the main mixers for the Park City Arts Festival, which is the same kind of thing, lots of stages. And the 2002 Olympics festivals, ceremonies, and all of that kind of stuff. I got to be part of all of that because of my skill set of just doing it over and over and over again. And it was amazing. It was amazing.
So thank you. Inspired. Catherine mentioned portfolio, and I think that's something important that you want to start thinking about. And speaking of that, I have a plug for you. Next week, Wednesday, we're doing a portfolio workshop, so you can learn how to build your portfolio. It's 4 p.m. and it's on Handshake. If you go to Handshake, you find out information. But I just wanted to mention that so I don't forget it. Now, Ethan, you mentioned internships. Can you talk a little bit about the internships you had and how you got it?
Yeah. So the industry is changing because the industry is always changing, and a lot of these internships don't exist in the same way that they did, and new internships are sort of taking their place. So I would say the way that I found them, my first year, the Great River Shakespeare Festival internship, is UT brought in someone from Great River Shakespeare to audition us. So we auditioned because we had a connection to Paul Barnes, because Terry Weber, and then the network is what it is. And we were very, very fortunate. But a few of the undergraduates and myself, around my senior year, we got together and we made a Google Sheet, and we searched internships and just started listing them, and then listed all of their submission due dates. And we were comparing them. This one provides housing, this one doesn't provide housing, this audition is due here. You can use the same audition material for this one and this one. And so we were creating this massive spreadsheet that we could then reference back and know how to move forward. So Great River Shakespeare Festival, I took an acting position there. I was an acting apprentice. And then because of my connections there, 3 years later, I went back as a directing intern. I did a year of grad school applications applying to act. That same year, I also auditioned for the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, just as part of my system. I also auditioned for Cincy Shakes. Cincinnati has a huge internship program. For the 3 largest theaters in Cincinnati, not just for actors, but also for technicians. It's a very, very intern appreciative city, I suppose. And so I was just doing my rounds, and I was fortunate enough to be needed in the cohort at the Playhouse, which is the 2nd largest theater in the Midwest after the Guthrie. So their connections there then, help build out. But I think we spend a lot of time in the theater talking about our emotions and talking about taking care of ourselves and our well-being. and that's really great, but there's often, I find, a lack of rigor and methodology to really having a strategy for how you're going to create a career. We're letting theater happen to us, and I found with these internships, I had to make them happen for myself. And so that was what was really important.
Okay, could I add one thing here? So Ethan Graham mentioned Great River Shakespeare Festival. I also work there, and we're going back to this model of bringing them here to campus. So representatives from Great River Shakespeare Festival will be here December 6th doing design and technology interviews and portfolio reviews. For any interested student who's interested in working in any design or technology position, crew, backstage, administration, there's lots of different opportunities. So there'll be interviews on December 6th for that, and on the 7th, they'll be doing auditions. And there are open auditions. Any UT student who wants to be seen, you are welcome to come in and audition, and we'll have the artistic director and the co-associate artistic director here on campus. So I will make sure that I send you, Buki, the information about that. So if you are interested in learning more about that, let me know in person now or shoot me an email, and I will give you all the information. We would love to have everyone in this room come and be part of that. It's even if you're not available to do it, practicing those interview skills and audition skills is the job.
Yeah. So one thing I would definitely do is once I get the information, everyone that attended today, I can always do a targeted video to you all. So here's your takeaway. Read my email. All right. Any questions? I still have more questions, but I want you guys to start asking questions. Any questions for you all?
I do want to mention here that, is that talking about how to find some of these jobs is that for technical jobs, for backstage jobs, there's a website, offstagejobs.com, that is the job listings like crazy of theater companies around the country that have positions available. There's ArtSearch, which is still up and running and viable. The USITT, United States Institute for Theater Technology, has a jobs board that is really, really useful. Those are some really. SETC, the Southeastern Theater Conference, has a jobs fair. This is in March, the first week of March. Second week of March this year?
I think it's second this year.
That has the largest summer theater auditions and interviews in the country, and and you can just literally go around and talk to every single theater company and show them your portfolio, show them your work. And it's really worth. This year it's a little far away. It's in Mobile, Alabama, but it's a really, really great place to meet theater companies.
I saw it now. Yeah.
Have you got the internship to year-round thing, or is it like certain seasons?
So the Great River Shakespeare Festival one is just in the summer, so it's great for current students, and their season is shorter than Utah, so it doesn't affect, it ends third week of July.
If you're an acting apprentice, you were previously required to attend strike as well, so it went to the first week of August for the last few years, but that might be changing.
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly what they're doing. We're actually in talks with them about developing probably a fellowship program, but it may not actually be an internship that they're hiring for. They may have some just regular paid positions for actors. But it is in the summer. It starts like May 15th and goes through like first week of August at the latest. So you would be able to, you wouldn't have any conflicts with your UT schedule.
Also, I'm thinking through some of the internships that sort of come up frequently. So in Cincinnati, both at Ensemble Theater and at Cincy Shakes, those are full year contract that you're on. If any of you saw Cato, that happened in the lab, Angelique Archer was a Cincy Shakes intern, and she worked there for a year, and then they just kept hiring her back while she was continuing to work. She's a really, really good example of someone who did internship well. But the Barter Theater, which is just right up the road, that's like an 18-month internship, right? So once you get that, you're employed for a long time. So there are things that will fit whatever stage you are. You just got to search for them.
Any other questions? I have more. So we spoke about skills earlier. So can we just talk about what are some of the skills and experiences and qualifications, maybe technology experience and everything like that you think is required or is going to be very helpful in your industry?
Creative problem solving in the technical side. Like I said earlier, I'm always asked to do something that I have no idea how I'm going to pull it off, and I have to say yes or no before I figure it out. Just the drive to want to figure out a problem, the work ethic to show up and work those long days, and I think that's it right now. Yeah. What do you think?
I agree. On the tech side, I tell my students all the time is that learning how to learn is, it's kind of funny, everybody kind of learns from YouTube videos, but there's actually a skill to learning how to learn from YouTube videos. And being able to do that, you can really, really be a problem solver. And the problem solver is what the industry is always looking for.
Speaking of YouTube, I took on a job where I needed to manufacture doors for a big clothing company. It was Altered State. They were opening, I can't remember how many stores, and I got several of them, 5 or 6 stores that I needed to make the doors for their dressing rooms, and hand tools weren't going to cut it. So I purchased a CNC without knowing how to run a CNC. And once the CNC showed up, I assembled it and jumped on YouTube and taught myself how to use a CNC and was able to do the job that I
If you don't know a CNC, it's the thing that
yeah, it's a robot that you program in drawings,
cuts out sheets of
for
stuff.
you.
Yep.
CNC router. So we now have one in the shop. I think my second year at the Clarence Brown, I kind of said, hey, we really need to get this technology in here. But you can learn if you take that risk. You can learn, and that risk kind of pushes you. If you say, yeah, I'll take this job without knowing how to do it, then you're kind of motivated to learn how to do that. So if you put yourself out there, good things are coming. So, yeah. But YouTube.
So a couple skills that I think are important that are beyond the obvious ones. So if you want to go into acting, you need to be able to play a strong objective. You need to have a well-trained voice. You need to have a well-developed body. You need to take acting classes and learn how to develop a relationship and pursue something and have that forward momentum that you need in your acting. But if you want to go into the profession of acting, you need a few skills that are ancillary to just how good of an actor you are. One of them is you need to have really good people skills, because you have to be able to walk into a room and talk to people, and you have to be bold enough to be able to connect with people. It goes without saying, everyone gets stage fright, but you have to be bold enough to go up and introduce yourself and say, hey, I know you're casting that project, and I want to let you know I'm really interested in it. You have to be able to do that to be an actor. It is not a passive realm. It is a realm in which you must have the skill of active pursuit of things, and then the skill you need that comes right after that is resilience. Because you have to be able to train and hone the skill of, you put your heart and soul into the audition and you absolutely knocked it out of the park, and you could not have done it any better than you did, but there was someone else who just was a little bit more the idea of what they had in mind, and that person gets the job. You have to practice and refine and train the skill of not making the mistake of believing the lie that means you aren't good at it, or you don't have something to offer, or that it's a comment on your personal worth. And that developing that muscle of resilience, it takes time and it takes practice. Related to the skill of resilience is the skill of not taking things personally. Maddie and I were just speaking about this. You know, if you want to be an actor, you're signing up to put your heart and soul into it, and then you're going to sit down and someone's going to tell you everything that didn't exactly work. And that is literally just the job. And that's after you get the job, because to get the job, you have to do those auditions, and 99 times out of 100, you probably don't get those jobs. So those are the kind of skills that are hard to learn and sometimes only come through just practice and surviving that rejection. But you have to do some inner work. You have to care for your well-being and your mental health and your spiritual and emotional health to be an actor. Because I don't want to make it sound like it's not a great field. It is. It's a wonderful field. But it is hard. It is a lot of rejection. And that's just something that is an essential aspect of what you're kind of signing up for if you want to pursue that. So you have to develop the skills to be able to survive that and emerge stronger and get up the next day and show up at that audition and do it again.
Two skills, again, that's sort of outside of the realm, and I also want to talk about, directing and just like being a multi-hyphenate artist, which is, something that I'm very passionate about, and I think many of us who are coming into the industry now are having to find that sense beyond the triple threat. But one thing is building the rigor to understand the industry beyond being a passive participant. It's sort of like voting, right? You can vote, but if you aren't informed, then what are you really doing with your vote? In the theater industry, knowing what the strikes mean, how that affects you, being able to read your contract and understand, break it down. Yeah, this is going to pay me $500 a week. That's great. But then divide by the 45 hours a week that you're rehearsing. What is that hourly? Oh, you're actually going to make more money in your day job, perhaps. Maybe you're not in a financial position where you can do this, right? Think about it. If you get $500 a week on a contract and you're working 52 weeks a year, for a non-equity contract, that's pretty good to make $500 a week. That's like $32,000 a year, right? You'll make more serving. So understanding your position in the ecosystem of the economy and the arts economy, I think is a skill that you have to learn now, because it took me too long. And then the other thing that we hadn't really touched on, but I think is fascinating, is we're talking about skills, and as artists, either in design or in acting or what have you, there are graduate programs that you can attend, but there are workshops everywhere. You can go to a workshop and take a specific acting technique. You can go to a workshop and learn a specific Adobe Creative Suite technique, right? The story that I like to tell, also working on Network, is I took a training in New York for 2 days that inspired me to take a week-long training in London. At that training, I met a director. 2 years later, that director was casting for a show, and I submitted. She hired me as a mover. If anyone has ever seen me act, I'm not a mover. I'm a singer and an actor. She hired me as a mover. That show got picked up to work the next year, so then I had 2 years of work at Christmas. And then I'm talking to the artistic director who just connected me to someone else. And that was all because I took a training in London years ago. You have no idea what these things are that are going to lead to your future gigs. So just continuing education somehow, I think, is vital.
Let's talk about networking. Because I know a lot of times when we say that to students, they're just like, you don't understand. It's so difficult to talk to someone. I get it, I understand. But we need to get a job, and you need to talk to someone to get a job, right? So let's talk about the importance of that, maybe tips and tricks and things that you have. And is it important? I mean, you can already tell that it's important, but let's hear it. Is it important? What are the tips and tricks, and maybe where can you go to find people, the right people, that will connect you to the next gig or the next opportunity?
It is all about who you know and all about who knows you and what you are. Don't ever burn bridges, no matter how bad you want to light that bridge on fire. Do not ever burn the bridge. As I was coming up, I called it cultivating gigs. I had a shop where I had overhead, I had people that depended on me for labor, for their hours. They were gigging. It was kind of like a gig type thing. So I would cultivate gigs. The symphony orchestra, Knoxville Symphony Orchestra, needed some props for their Christmas show, but they could only pay, $200 or $300. So I would put myself out to do this work that I knew I wasn't going to get a ton of money for. Or the haunted house that's up in Powell, they wanted me to do this huge design. I never got any work out of it. Or churches that needed design stuff, never got any work. But I'm cultivating, I'm getting my name out there like this person. So the person that I was working with at that church may have down the road had a band that needed some lighting done. And sure enough, somebody was releasing an album and they needed somebody to program some moving lights for their album release party. So just knowing people, I worked with the Bandit Lights folks on loading in some lighting for shows. One of their managers was friends with Paula Dean's tour manager, and they needed somebody to design and build her a kitchen. They wanted one person to design and build a kitchen that they could put in a truck. So this person said, "Oh, I know the perfect guy for you." So without ever knowing this guy or doing these smaller gigs, I would have never been put in that position. Similar to the Hatfield and McCoy, it was Black Bear Jamboree before Hatfield and McCoy. I would go in there and change out their Christmas show. So it was a couple $100 night gig. I would go in at 10 o'clock. We'd be done at 6 in the morning. It was a terrible gig. But when they decided to change over, they're like, well, we know this guy. He's a great guy. Let's call him and see if he's interested in designing and building this show for us. So that led to a $150,000 gig. So a couple $100 here, but, so it's all about who you know and who knows you. It's about working hard, keeping your nose to the grindstone, I think they say. So, yeah. But network is huge.
For actors, I would suggest yes, have your group of actor friends, but really cultivate your group of director and writer friends, and ideally casting director friends. So you have to get outside of your little silo. And yes, make a theater company, make work together, make a film company, make films together. But make those connections with writers and directors especially, because if you know a couple writers who like you and who will write stuff for you, or if you know a couple directors who are like, oh, you know what, who would be perfect for this little thing, they call you to work on their student film, and then 5 years later, they're directing episodic television, and you know them, and they remember you. So I would be intentional about cultivating your network of folks who are not actor function, but are the adjacent fields that actors need to know to build that network out. And I would say writers, directors, casting directors are the three places where I would probably put my focus. And then I want to encourage you, I touched on this before about developing the boldness to, you see someone at a party and to go up to them and say, hey, I loved that film that you directed. I saw it at this festival and it was really great. I love that actor that you cast. Being bold enough to do that. The reason I have the job that I have now is because when I came here as a guest artist in 2013 to do one show at Clarence Brown Theater, I recognized, okay, rewind back to what I told you about UNC Chapel Hill and Playmakers Rep, and I saw this model and I went, this is that gig, this is that job that I want. And so I made a meeting with the artistic director and we went out to dinner and I literally just told him, this is the job I want. I will come back here anytime to do any gig. Just count me in. If you need a teacher, if you need a dialect coach, if you need an actor, call me. I will make it happen because I love this place and I would love to be here moving ahead. And that was 10 years ago and now, or that was 11 years ago actually. And it took about 4 years for me to be like regularly working here, and then it took like 8 years for me to have a full-time position here. But I think that it was part of my clarity. Like, yes, it's bold to do that, but people like it when you just tell them very clearly and directly what your intentions are. And I think he appreciated that about me, and he took me up on it, and So that's a kind of very direct networking. Tell people what you want, what you're interested in, and what you want to pursue. And don't be shy about that. Like, there's no shame in saying what you want. And you'll meet some people who are willing to help you get it.
I think it's important to note that Katie's first show here, she was terrific in. And I think that what she's saying works when you back it up with just good, solid work that she didn't piss anybody off. She wasn't a problem. She wasn't, and so being a good employee, which is really what it is just being a good employee, then doing all of those things, then they go, oh yeah, I like that person around, and I want to create more opportunities for that person,
You were fantastic on the show. What I'm hearing is there's a authenticity that you need to have as you go through this. I think we hear the word networking, and it's like, I'm going to put my business card everywhere, I'm going to put my headshot everywhere, and I'm going to get as many people as possible to know me. And that has never once helped me. There's sort of wide, shallow networking, and then there's deep networking. Think about shows that you work on, regardless of your position. There might be 30 people, there might be 50 people on that show. You're not going to be everyone's best friend. You might not even like everyone. And that's okay, don't treat them poorly. But trying to invest in that many people means that you're not going to have any deep roots. So when I'm working on contracts or going to organizations, I find the 2 or 3 people that I really resonate with who also are fitting these sort of categories. They're directors and actors as well. But I'm finding these people and I say, yes, I want to bring you along. Because it's not just you networking with them, they are networking with you. So you are making active connections with someone that you can then recommend, right? You're sending the elevator back down. And I've gotten more jobs, I think, by just making those sorts of connections, and then we just trade opportunities, than I have saying, just trying to be everyone's friend in the room all the time, because that can get exhausting. But I totally agree.
Questions? Gina, for actors or people and students like me, if you have a family who's not supportive in the arts, how do you plan to do living combination? How do you make that in a situation where those want to pursue a career?
Man, that is a tough one. So, first of all, if that's your situation, I'm sorry, because that's such a tough spot to be in. And I think it's easy for parents or people who love us or partners to want to protect us, and therefore want to prevent us from going into fields that they know are full of rejection or financial insecurity. And I think that's an expression of their love. Maybe it doesn't feel that way in the moment. And this is one of the things that's kind of specific about this field that we're all in, is that there's an element of pursuing one's passion that makes you go into this line of work. I would like to think that computer programmers are as passionate about what they do, but I feel like there's an aspect of what we do that's kind of like a calling. And if you have that calling and it feels like it's your place you fit in the world, and like what you have to contribute is related to that calling, it's very difficult to explain to muggles, so people who are not at all related to this realm. It's hard to explain to them why it's worth doing it. So I would say invest in relationships with people who do understand it, and communicate openly with your spouse, partner, parents, whoever, about why you're choosing this, and taking those steps to make sure you're caring for your well-being will be things that will make them feel better about it, I think. But I'd be lying if I said that still to this day, my mom thinks I should have been a lawyer. And she's like, still not entirely convinced that I'm not going to change my mind. Like, there's a part of her that thinks I'm going to come home at Christmas and say I'm going to go to law school. And the reason is because she thinks this less, but for many years she thought that I would be safer and that it would be better for me and my well-being if I pursued something else. I don't know that I really answered that, but I hope I gave you some thoughts.
I do think it's a lot about communicating to your family the passion and the calling and how important this is. But also, I think that, you know, family is what you make it. And I think this industry is family a lot. And I think that you can find family outside of family that do support it, is the point. And I think that a lot of us do that. A lot of us find find our own family, you know.
Maybe the last piece of that is if you don't have, like, I did not come from, I had a family that supported me in wanting to do the arts. They didn't know anything about the arts, and there was no real money to be had to go make it happen. So I didn't have the privilege of, like, yes, I have a family who's going to support me to move to New York for 6 months financially while I figure it out. So I didn't have the privilege or the luxury of not being prepared, which is one reason why I'm so strategic in my career is I'm going to work these jobs. I will not do a show for the next 6 months because I'm going to make this much money. I need this money in order to pay this much in rent in order to move here. While I'm on this gig, I need to be able to do this. Like, I think it's a lot harder, as always, when you don't just have like bundles of money sitting around in little bags. But it then, I think, builds the rigor that serves you better further along down the line, right? You just have to take more time on the front end to really plan.
Going back to what you said about boldness and everything, mainly, how does one captivate that boldness to go out and talk to all these people online? Because clearly, you know, for me, I'm very quiet.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't want to talk to people, it's just like, for whatever reason, it's kind of hard.
Sure.
So how does one develop the skills that need to network and to build these long-time relationships with people?
I think you just did this really well right here, Gideon, actually, right? Like, coming out, asking the question, and really, like, put it out there, and it traveled through space and came to us. And so you do have that skill. You do have the capacity to do that. I know for some people it's harder. It just depends on your nature. Like, my whole life I've just been a very outgoing person. And so it is a little bit easier for me. Like, I want to own that. It's easier for me because it's just part of my nature. But I know a lot of actors who are not so outgoing like that. And for them, it just takes practice. And I think what I would suggest is give yourself like when you go to events, give yourself a challenge, like, I'm going to ask a question. Because that takes boldness. Like, everybody's sitting here in this space and you know the feeling, any questions, and then you start to become self-conscious. Like, it takes boldness to ask a question in a setting like this. And you just demonstrated that really well. And every time you do that, it gets a little bit easier. Some language I use a lot in my acting classes is that, oh, it was non-fatal. Right? And the reason that I say that is because the fear that we experience when we get stage fright or we get nervous before we have to do public speaking is that is fight or flight. It's a rush of hormones, it is a rush of adrenaline, and your body thinks you are literally in a life or death situation, which is why your voice starts shaking and you can't breathe and your heart is racing. It's the same thing that happens if there's a serial killer chasing you. So it's important to learn that it is actually non-fatal to have that feeling, do the hard thing, and then survive it. And the more you do that over and over again, the less you feel like that is going to overwhelm you. But it does take practice. So I would say, go to these career events and give yourself a challenge. Like, I'm going to go speak to 2 different recruiters. And, or if you're auditioning, I'm going to go to these 2 auditions and I'm going to tell them, be prepared with questions, like look people up before you go to stuff, because then you can say, oh, you did this film with this person. And all those things give you a little bit more confidence. But I think practicing and doing exactly what you just did here is how you get better at that particular skill. Yeah.
I used to be afraid of heights, which is a terrible thing for somebody that works in tech. My first job at the technical direction job was at the Bijou Theater. It's a I don't know if anybody's been there. It's a vaudeville house, over 100 years old. The grid in there is wooden, and it sags probably 5 feet over the run of it. So I had to go up there and do a whole bunch of work. And the first time, it took me like 10 minutes to get across that thing, because I'm like testing out all the boards and seeing which ones are safe to stand on. 5 years later, I'm just like zipping across. I'm on my hands and knees reaching through, and it's a practice thing. Like you get exposed to it. I'm also used to be terribly afraid of public speaking, to the point where I would just sweaty hands and just awful at it. But just practicing and doing it. I also reference something that was super hard for me. I made a life choice several years ago to start playing hockey again. And I showed up for the first time ever. I hadn't played in like 10 years, bought all new equipment, showed up to a locker room full of guys that I had no idea who they were, and had to perform in front of them. And I'm also not a performer. That's why I'm in tech, I'm backstage. But I had to perform. As a goalie, I'm sort of a singular part of a team. So whenever I have to do something hard, and I don't know if this applies anywhere else, but it's perfect for me. Whenever I have to do something hard or I have something coming up, I always look back at that and go, if I can do that, I can do this. If I did that, I can do this. And it just gets easier. It's like it snowballs. It just gets easier and easier every time something comes up. That's all I have to offer on that.
And one general networking tip is interested is interested. So if you're interested in someone genuinely, you care about what they do, you care about knowing about them, and you're asking about them, it's always a good way to get the conversation started, such that they are opening up to you because, oh, God wants to know about me. And then from there, they're interested in you as well, and then the conversation continues. But that's always one thing to use as a tip. Questions? Okay.
So currently I'm struggling with trying to find out if I really love the process, and because I love performing, I love reaching those opening nights and reaching the performance nights. But then sometimes the work is really hard, and I just don't want to get up and do it. I get exhausted, I get burned out really easily, and I'm a believer in loving the processes. Any tips or any ways of really finding out if you really love the process or not?
I have one very specifically. There's a book, it's called Design Your Life, and it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal. But what it talks about is it talks about prototyping different versions of your life, right? So like imagine you want to be, we'll use acting. Imagine you want to be an actor. It's like, this is what that career is, right? It's auditioning at 8 a.m. every single day and it's doing all this. It's like, okay, work it all the way back to what is like the smallest bit of that. Not going full throttle, not investing 100% yet, but like, what is that? Is it submitting an audition a week? Is it doing this? And like testing out the grind to see if it's something that's sustainable for you. Auditioning wasn't sustainable for me. I don't love auditioning. I don't love the process. That's why I'm not in New York, because I don't want to be part of that culture. I'm a part of a different sort of mindset in that regard. And I tried it, and it wasn't for me. So I learned to love the process of doing a show really, really well and focusing all of my attention on that thing instead of trying to do 10, 15 shows at a time. But you can do that with everything, right? If it's technical theater, if it's figuring out if you want to try not serving, but any other like little job. I think one thing that we find when we're talking about careers is careers feel like a really long time, like you're thinking about a whole trajectory of your life. But for a lot of those things, they're jobs. They're day jobs. You can try them. If you do not like them, You do not owe them anything other than being polite and a notice. You can just try it and then give it up and try something else. So I have found for myself, I've done different day jobs, I've tried different elements of technical theater that I really wasn't good at. It's like, I have to try this. I have to see if it's interesting. But then I got so burnt out, like, my brain doesn't work this way. So just find the smallest bit of it that you can like work through is really helping.
Yeah, I think you're already ahead of the game because you're realizing that. And in some aspect, trying to make that work for you, like how can I really want this, but how can I make it work for me? In my position, I don't get to travel a lot. I don't get to, like, my previous position, my jobs were everywhere. I would get to travel. Every day I was going to a different job site. I don't get to travel at all here. My work is always in one spot, so I had to make changes to make this job work for me. So just realizing that and trying to figure out what that is for you. Also, when I was at the Bijou Theater, I had almost zero creativity when I was there, and I got burnt out on that. So I had to change. I had to leave because there was zero creativity. And I figured out, I'm along my journey, I've figured out who I am through my work. Realizing that I need that creativity as an outlet was a huge thing, and then to step away from that. So.
I think I don't like touring. I don't like big cities. And I am able to make a career knowing that I don't want those to be part of my life. You know what I mean? And I think the industry is big enough that you can find avenues that go, okay, well, I don't like this aspect of preparation and rigor in this way, but this other acting avenue doesn't do that particular thing. Choosing academia over the profession, or choosing the summer stock model. Like maybe you just want to do summer stock because the rest of the year is too grueling to do that. You know what I mean? There's ways to be involved and fulfill your passions and not have all the bad with it all the time. Is the whole point. And I really think that it's varied enough that you could do that.
Maybe I'm not an actor, but maybe commercials, doing commercial shoots. If the rehearsal process is something that wears you out, maybe just auditioning.
Just on this past experience.
Commercials,
Yeah.
Or film festivals or films or something like that. Yeah.
And I think rewarding yourself for taking every step. It's like very big. It doesn't have to be the biggest step, just like you were saying, like you don't have to have done something great and then, oh yes, I've done something huge. Like just taking the step. Someone described it this way, is that if you told yourself that you want to be going to the gym every day, if the next day all you did was wear your shoes, tie your lace, and you didn't go, you took the step or you started. And I think that it's important to see that progress. Progress is really that you've done something different from yesterday, and not necessarily that you've achieved all that you can in one day. So that's also cool.
Yeah, with the new model of theater changing, how would you give advice for early to mid-career artists in their career for navigating that landscape? As we know, the traditional theater, as you mentioned, is changing quite greatly. So we're up and coming in a weird position.
So I think before you answer that, or in addition to that, like, can you talk about what is changing to, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Well, I think the initial, and correct me if this is not right, but so the pandemic changed things for every realm and every aspect of our culture, of course. And there's this adage, the show must go on, right, in theater. And the profession of theater, but really also the performing arts, film, television, live entertainment, all of it. There was this overwhelming kind of culture of you do anything it takes to do the thing, like you never say no and you always say yes, and you accept whatever the terms are, and you show up even if you have a broken leg, and you just go because you're so lucky to have this opportunity. And I think one of the things that happened during the pandemic, and a lot of the cultural and social conversations that aligned with that period of time that we were having as a society about what our values are, and fairness, and equity and equality. A lot of theaters and the profession at large started to look at some of these established practices that had just been accepted as this is how we do things and therefore it is right. And one tiny aspect of that introspection was the reconsideration of the internship model, where the entire operation of a theater is supported by totally unpaid labor, without some educational value component attached to it in some cases. So a lot of places that had internships that were like that suspended them and kind of went back to the drawing board to think about how can we do this and offer this opportunity for young artists and early career professionals to be able to get this experience and work in a professional theater. But what can we offer them in exchange other than money, and perhaps some money as well? So just so everyone knows, I mean, I think that's part of what has changed. But other things that have changed are like, you used to have to live in New York if you wanted to work in the acting profession, or you had to live in LA, New York or LA. Now, the markets are much smaller and they're more distributed. You can be an actor in Nashville. You can be a professional actor in Nashville. I know many of them who don't really have day jobs, and they do some teaching, they do commercials, they do professional theater, they do live entertainment gigs, and they do films. I can think of one right now who I did 2 shows with last year. She's in a movie with Nicole Kidman and Frances McDormand, and she's got a couple of commercials that are regional but then got bought up and are now national commercials. So you can have a career as a professional actor in any large market city. Atlanta really is the spot. Atlanta is the place. It is the biggest, fastest growing media market, especially for film and television. Theater's a little bit different in Atlanta. But now everything's self-tapes. So you can be seen for a lot of projects that you wouldn't have been able to because you couldn't be in the physical room. So those are some things that have changed. I don't know.
Which means you need a good self-taping system for yourself. You need a room that works and with sound that works and an equipment. And it doesn't have to be really expensive. It just has to be purposeful and set up well.
Yeah.
But I think the piece of it that is like heartening and also disheartening is it's more open access. It's more equitable because anyone can audition. You don't have to be able to fly to New York and do these auditions. You can submit, which means you are also now competing with a larger market overall.
Yeah.
I have a friend who just a couple days ago made her off-Broadway debut, but she got that job because she moved to New York and was auditioning for everything, kind of not indiscriminately, but auditioning a lot. But she was based in Cincinnati and then was getting gigs in Greenville, South Carolina, working at the Warehouse Theater, and then was like taking other gigs and was just working around because she submitted to everything. And I think the hard part about that is because everyone can now submit to everything, people are seeing more submissions overall. So having the tenacity and the structure to be like, exactly what you said, Katie, it is not on you if you did not get that gig so much of the time. They're seeing so many people.
So many people now.
So many people.
So many people.
Yeah. So it's just building that.
Is there a way to stand out?
If you're doing, I've heard, I'm not an actor, but I talk to a lot of actors, that because of the number of taped auditions that come in 10 seconds, if you can't kind of stand out in 10 seconds, then they might just move on. In these big cattle call big, there's lots of times when they request something, or hey, can you send me something, or you know somebody and they'll actually watch the whole thing. But there are a lot of times that they just next.
And that's true in live auditions too. I mean, honestly, I've been part of casting teams for a lot of things, and I was a reader in New York for Broadway auditions for a long time. So I'd be there with the casting director, and I'd be the person reading the other part off the actor who's auditioning. And 9 times out of 10, you could tell when they walked in the door before they even ever started acting, because there was something about their presence, their confidence, and the alignment between expectation and reality. So they looked like their headshot. And then they walked in the room and they looked like the character. And then they did their acting, and their acting was in line with who their human self was. It wasn't like they're putting on this persona. It was just a revealing of themselves. And those are those things that's like so obvious in 10 seconds, Joe. It really is. On film or in person.
I was going to ask about the process of finding those auditions.
Yeah.
Like how do you guys go about that, and how do you suggest new actors go about that?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. And I think this applies not just to acting, it applies to all of the industries of theater. So there are multiple job boards like on the internet that people use a lot. I mean, the big ones that people say, Backstage, Playbill, Actors Access, like there are just databases of jobs and you search for them. I did it, I mean, this was not before those times, but back when I was doing this internship work, I knew I wanted to do Shakespeare. So I got a list of every Shakespeare festival in the country, and I went on every single one of their websites, line by line. I was like, what is the audition page? What are they looking for? Or I knew that I wanted to do specifically Little Shop of Horrors. So then I was searching specifically auditions for this show, and I was just very systematic in how I went about that. Now then it gets into the strategy of how are you submitting? Are you submitting through these job sites? Do you go through them directly? Do you email them and say, hey, I would like to audition? And that's personal preference. I don't know if we're teaching something different now.
Yeah, I mean, it's really changing. So there's theater and there's film and television, and they're kind of somewhat different. But there are, let's say that you graduate and you move to some other place. Let's say you move to Atlanta. So there will be a trade publication, like a trade paper.
Yeah.
There will be a website, and it might be Casting Networks or Actors Access, and they will have all of what we call breakdowns. And breakdowns are like the job description. So the role is Annabella, and she has these qualities, and she's this age. That's what we're casting. And you look at the breakdown and you see, you know what, I am really right for Annabella. So on that website, you have your profile, you have your resume and your headshot, and you probably have a couple little videos that maybe one is a monologue and one is a scene. And then you click submit. You probably have to pay a couple dollars to do it. You click, and then the casting director gets your submission, Nevaeh, and they go through and look at all of those, and then they cut it down to a smaller pool of people, and then they might send you a thing saying, hey, we really liked your read. Would you please film this scene, pages 2 and 3 of this scene, start here and finish here. And then you get a partner to help you, and they stand behind the camera and read the other lines, and you do the audition, and they get that. And then if it's like a network show, after that point, you might get called into a producer session where you're there in person on like a sound stage, or just in a studio. And you audition for the executive producer of NCIS for the role of Annabella, you know, and that there's some person wearing a suit who has to sign off on everyone who gets even the little under 5 parts. So whichever city you're in, you'll kind of need to find out what are those resources like that. Everyone always is curious about agents. So once you have an agent, Then you have someone who is like, Nevaeh is really good at these 3 things, and that agent is looking at those same breakdowns, and they're going, oh, Nevaeh is perfect for this, and they're sending your stuff in. So once you get to the point where you have an agent, you kind of have somebody who's doing a little bit of the legwork on your behalf, but you can't stop doing it for yourself because that agent has like 50 to 100 clients, maybe 300 sometimes. So you still have to be very active, but having an agent kind of puts you sometimes a little bit higher in the pile. And getting an agent, how do you get an agent? You do networking. You go and you put something together with your friends, whether it's a show that you and your friends put together and you invite agents to come see it, and they send their intern. And their intern comes and says, Nevaeh was awesome in this thing, you should bring her in, and then they call you in for a meeting. So it feels like just this totally insurmountable series of hurdles when you're just thinking about it from when you're in college. But if you rely on your friends, if you make a group of friends in whatever city you go to, and you all share resources, Ethan Graham has talked about this so much, and he's really good at it. Like sharing your knowledge, breaking it down, finding out what is the website that we need to use, and what headshot photographer does everybody really like, and what shows am I right for? You know, what shows do you like, and what shows do you think you're castable on? Then you know which you find out what casting director works on that show, and then you want to get in touch with them. And it kind of helps you to focus it in a little bit so it doesn't feel so overwhelming, like I just have to audition for every single thing and send every single thing out. You can be a little bit more strategic.
Would you suggest, let's say you find a role that's available, but it's not really a role you maybe you're right for,
Yeah.
would you suggest auditioning anyway? Or do you think you should, once you go through parts that they know?
I would suggest going for it anyway, because those things, like I've seen so many times, and I'm sure this is true in other professions, they write the job description, like we do this when we hire professors. We write the job description with what we think we want. But then someone applies for the job and they don't exactly match what was in the description, but they actually are what we want because they have something that is specific and unexpected. So I would not limit yourself by not submitting for things that you think you're not right for. I wouldn't submit, like for me, I wouldn't submit for, well, now I submit for 50s. I would not submit for 60s or 70s. And now I would like still submit for 30s, even though I'm 40s. You know what I mean? So if there's something that I think, I'm really right for this part, yeah, I'm probably a little bit older than what they have in mind, or especially for me, because I play older, even though, like, and I always have. So I'm very comfortable going, yeah, they think they want a 55-year-old, but if they see me and I come in and I bring my gravitas to it, they won't know I'm 40, you know? So it's that kind of stuff. Like, don't let little things like that stop you from submitting. If you think there's something that you can bring to it, go for it.
All right. Okay, cool.
So about that self-submissions and more popular, say, like YouTube talent only, how does it look like if you're reading a script, and is there that expectation to memorize it all and all stuff?
That's a great question. Read the breakdown. Oftentimes it will tell you. If you're coming in for something where they have provided it for you in advance, then the best thing you can do to show preparation would be to memorize it all. Sometimes there's not time. You know, if you're getting a 24-hour turnaround, and I think SAG just wrote this into their new contract of like, you cannot be required to be memorized under a certain amount of hours, right? So there's different things, but what I did, I just did a callback the other day. It was, I think I had like 15 pages of slides to go through, which is wild. And it was all digital. So I pulled it up on my TV, and then I had the computer in front of me, so I was acting into my computer camera, but I was reading the lines off the TV behind it, like getting it out of your hands and out of the way. That was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a really good idea, and a lot of people do that for filmed auditions. Speaking of the ways the industry is changing, this is one of the things that's currently in conversation and part of what's being addressed in the SAG strike right now is how to compensate actors for the work that they do that's unpaid work just to audition, especially if they're getting long packets of material that they have to or are expected to memorize. So I would say, like, it's always going to be best if you know it extremely well, and it's for a very simple reason, because everything is in your eyes, and if your eyes are down here, they don't have that connection to your soul. So know it well enough to have your eyes up, but there's a caveat. Don't learn it imprecisely. Like, you need to know it basically word for word, and if it means that you still have to reference it a little bit more, do that rather than paraphrasing, because a lot of times in especially film and television auditions, the writer or someone from the writer's room or the producer is at the table, and they really care about their words being what their words are. Most of the time in theater auditions, we don't have the playwright right there. But we just had a casting director work with the graduate acting students on some auditions for what we call co-star roles or under fives. It's like on a TV show, the secretary who comes in and brings a file and says, you know, Mr. Smith, your 5 p.m. appointment is outside. Like those little parts, or like a nurse who has a couple lines. So she did a workshop on auditions for those types of projects, and each actor had 3 lines that they were expected to memorize. And one of them, or a couple of them, they really learned them very imprecisely, and they felt confident, like, I learned this, but they learned it paraphrasing. And she was very emphatic. You want to make sure that you are word for word. So I would say, don't sacrifice precision don't try to skip those steps. And if you have to reference it a little bit, it would be better to do that.
Oh, and just really quickly, what we've been talking about a lot is when you've been given something to prepare. If you're going into an audition where they have asked you to bring something prepared, you're memorized.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that, like, the Christmas Carol audition that just happened, it was like, if you don't have something, here are sides, and they were prepared for you, that's different.
Yeah.
But in general, if they have not provided you something, then you're memorized.
Yeah.
Another question going off of that. So I've noticed now that the CBT is starting to provide sides,
Yeah.
monologue work sides, which is more preferred than
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anywhere else that I've been.
Actually, it happens a lot when you have, so this was something that was important to me, is very few auditions for theater are actually monologues. That's like a dying thing. And the only time you really do that is if you're going to an EPA, which is a required audition the theater has to have, that oftentimes they're not really hiring, but they're required to do it. So when you go in with an agent appointment for a show, you're going to have sides, and you will get the sides in advance, and you're expected to prepare them, and then you come in and you read with a reader. And I thought it was really important that we give our students the experience of having that opportunity to work with a reader, because it's a very particular skill, and knowing how to interact with a reader, and to have the practice of preparing the sides. So we wanted to create an audition experience that's more like the industry standard, especially in New York for LORT theaters. A general audition where you're like, hey, I want to work at your theater, and they have once a year a general audition just to meet people. Those are going to be monologues. But for specific shows, it's going to be sides, and you'll probably be working with a reader. So My preference when I'm behind the table would be that you work with the sides. I haven't convinced all my colleagues that this is the right approach, so there was a little bit of a mix of like, oh, I want to see monologues, or oh, I want them to read. But from my experience, if you're working with a reader, you see an actor who's listening and responding and taking in what the reader is doing and reacting to that, as opposed to what they practiced in their monologue at home. So that would be my personal bias, but it depends on who you ask.
We'll take this last question because we're out of time. This has been so fun. This last question and then just wrap up.
So I come in theater role on the opposite, the behind the scene. Like, I love business of theater. That's like my favorite thing I can go on about hours. But the one thing I wanted to ask is for people who are not the actor and working on every other side of it, people that, sides of people that don't see in the audience, what has been one challenge you didn't expect coming from that position?
Challenge I didn't expect. Challenge I didn't expect. I don't know, I've been doing it so long. I'm sure there were lots when I was young that I didn't.
Or what's a challenge that someone has entering the career field in that aspect? What's something that they should know going into it?
I think it's sort of been said already is that work hard and be personable and show that you love the work and show that you are interested in the work. I think that there's still, so talking about how the industry is changing a little bit, and unpaid internships and stuff like that. I think that one of the challenges still is the expectation that it takes a lot of time and energy to do the work we do, and people want to pay very little for it. And so convincing people that what is the TikTok, the song that it costs this much because it takes, how does that go? Yes, exactly, right? And I think learning that balance of trying to figure out, well, how much am I willing to give for the opportunity versus how much I need to pay the bills and what my time is worth, and still not burning bridges. It is challenging. It's really hard. And it's, but I always, my favorite freelance sound designer, Lindsay Jones, who works all over the world, all over the country, he says he takes two kinds of projects. He takes projects that pay well and projects that are artistically satisfying. And sometimes they don't match. And I've tried to live by that, is that I'm okay not being paid sometimes if I just passionately love it and it fulfills me. And otherwise I just need some money. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but...
Somebody that's going into the business of theater, if you can realize early on that there are three aspects, good, fast, and cheap, you only get to pick two.
Also another TikTok thing. Yes.
And then, like for me, I love what I do, but I don't get paid a ton of money. But I'm happy to come to work every day. I love what I do. Or I could go to work and get paid a ton of money, but just be miserable all day. So there's a weird balance.
This has been very, very great. Thank you all so much. And I want to wrap us up, but I just have this pressing question. We're out of time, but just spare me this 1 minute. Is the relation between theater and film and whatnot. So what is like overlapping in terms of like all of the ideas and advice you've shared? Can it also be applied mostly in film, or is that something that they just need to do differently?
I think the skill sets are completely apply to both.
Yeah.
Completely. The processes are different. So they have their own methodology or their own process of daily work and design process and audition process, but the skill sets are actually just completely applicable to film, TV, entertainment, even Dollywood. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our students go to work at Dollywood and perform at Dollywood, or sound engineers at Dollywood. You know, entertainment industry. It's all the skill set, completely transferable. Completely transferable.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you all so much. Can we just clap for our panelists? Final thing, this has been recorded, so we'll put it on our YouTube if you want to go back and check it. For those that did not check in, if you just want to check in, there's a QR code right there for you to check it. Because that's how I know that you came, and then I can send you the information. And more things that they would share with me, always check your email, because we'll get it out that way, and maybe on social media as well. But thank you all so much for being here. It's been a wonderful pleasure, and I hope you have the best in acting, producing, whatever you choose to do. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.